Welcome United. So we have a great episode for you today. I'm here from the Hattle Hall, Assembly Hall, to give you a sneak preview of some of the highlights and the great things coming this episode. Enjoy.
Can you share a little bit about what you think people get wrong about D3 athletics?
And so I always really instill that on these athletes, like whether it's an unplanned or planned way of ending, make sure you say goodbye to the sport in a way that works for you.
Steve Kerr, he was talking about Steph Curry and just how his best performances, he looks like he's just playing backyard basketball, and just how important that is. And so much of what they focus on, again, at that most elite level, so much of what they're focusing on is how are we connecting you to that joy, to that backyard basketball of just playing the game that you love and you grew up, just excited to get out and do. And so I love that you're working with athletes on how to tap into that, because it's so important.
I love watching the World Series every year. And even though I'm from Wisconsin, I am a Cubs fan. So sorry, everyone.
And she asked, how can you let go of the things that are keeping you stuck? And I really like that question. And I was curious, in the spirit of that question, what's keeping student athletes most stuck, you think, right now?
Become pretty normalized. But still there's some hesitation there, or there's a few athletes that still do the whole, "Ooh, if I look at her, that means something." And
she knows what's going on with me. I don't want to go there. I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, she's a mind reader. She's going to know there's something up. And so I think continuing to just make it normal that just like there's nutritionists and athletic trainers and all of that, there's mental performance, there's counselors there, and we're all part of the same team. A big thing with mental performance is they think there's going to be immediate effects, and I wish there were, but the truth is it takes just as much practice in those skills as it does the technical skills of the sport. But if you're willing to put in that work and willing to be honest of what's working, what's not, then we'll get there.
All right. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the United podcast with Big Team at Indiana University. This is our podcast on student-athlete mental health. My name is Nina Winsick. I'm a second-year PhD student in counseling, sport, and performance psychology here at IU, and I'm so stoked to finally be grabbing the mic as your host for today's episode. I'm also honored to be joined by my friend and colleague, Kathryn Colby. Kathryn and I met in our Springfield college days, where we earned our master's degrees in what will forever be remembered as a stellar cohort of students, which we affectionately refer to as our cohort. So Kathryn, thanks so much for joining the show today.
Hi, Nina. And yes, I love our cohort, and I talk about it all the time.
Yeah, how could we not? All right, Kathryn. So we have a unique way of introducing our guests on this podcast. In honor of our historic and undefeated Indiana Hoosier football team, we like to throw it to Coach Signetti to get the party started.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. I win. Google me.
Okay, so Kathryn, if Coach Sigs were to Google you, what wins would his search come up with?
I really want to try to stay professional with that because I wanted to make a joke there. But I think my biggest professional win would be the program I started at Whitewater with mental health and mental performance, and just getting athletes to be comfortable and not run away from me when they see me or pretend they don't know me. And then I guess personally, my biggest wins are just having fun and being close by my family and being the class clown wherever I go. Those would be personally and professionally my biggest wins.
I think I'd have to second that, knowing you from being in school with you. So I love it. Well, again, so grateful to be reunited with you today, and excited to get into this conversation. Also, it feels really important to share that as a Wisconsinite, you're in some good company with a lot of my colleagues here at IU. I'd say we have a bit of a cheesehead posse here in the doc program, so just know that you're welcome here with open arms.
Okay, and I will say I feel like I'm top cheesehead since my last name is also Cheese, but I'll give it to him.
This is true. Okay, yeah. Awesome. Well, Kathryn, I'd love to hear kind of more about this story of how you landed in your position as training coordinator and athletic specialist counselor at UW-Whitewater. Walk us through that journey.
Yeah, I will say that title itself is new as of last July, so almost a year. But after I graduated from Springfield, I decided I wanted to go back home for a little bit, so back to Wisconsin, started applying for jobs. Whitewater was hiring. Went through the application process, and I was really excited because they were talking about athletics. And that's obviously with our program, that's something I wanted to do. And they had a couple people like doing things with the athletes, but nothing really solidified as a program. So when I got there, that's what I started. I was throwing all my ideas out, what I wanted to do, what I was hoping for, here's my skills, all of that. And over the last few years, I slowly kind of built things. So it was doing workshops with the teams, meeting one-on-one with athletes, whether that was for mental health or mental performance. And then not this past summer, but the summer before that, I got the coaches and the athletic director to agree to do my very intense, in-depth mental health screeners for the athletes. First year was a little interesting, and then last year worked out the kinks, and so we did that. So I think it was like 660 athletes I ended up doing these screeners for and meet with them. And every year I feel like I just do a little bit more, meet with the athletes a little bit more. This year specifically, I was very lucky. The track coach, he was like, I have these crazy ideas. Are you able to do them? And I was like, I can ask. And my boss said yes. And so I've been doing a lot more with the team, going to meets, going to their practices, doing kind of small, like the event group things. So there's that aspect, the athletics aspect. But then the training coordinator aspect is also new as of last year. So this is my first year of my first cohort of trainees. And for me, I feel like that does have a lot to do with mental performance. It's building that confidence, listening to their self-talk, just kind of all the mental skills we think about with athletes, I use with the trainees, and even like our didactics we do. I'm like, how can we make it more engaging, more experiential versus just lecturing? So as much as they're kind of two different things, I think they go hand in hand, and I'm really excited to kind of keep building both of these programs, and the support I get from everyone has been super nice. So yeah, I feel like that was a little longer than I wanted to say, but I really love what I do. So
Yeah, no, and your passion comes through on that. And I think, it sounds like there's just been from the jump, it sounds like there's been so much support for you kind of coming into this position, creating it sort of almost from the ground up of just, hey, what does it look like to have this liaison between athletics and our student athletes? And like you were saying, make it so that you're approachable and you're someone that they can connect with, not just somebody in an office. And can you share more about just your connection with coaches and building those relationships and kind of their buy-in on the work that you do?
yeah, I think it kind of goes back to even before I started there. So before I went to Springfield, I had a gap year between undergrad and grad school. And I had reached out to the director of sports medicine, the head athletic trainer at Whitewater. And I was like, can I just come into the space? Like, I just want to know what it's like to work with athletes and not being an athlete. So shout out to Steve Hilmer because he said yes. And when I applied for this job, he, you know, my boss at the time, she had reached out to him and it was like, yeah, she mentioned she knows you. And he's like, oh my gosh, yes. Like, what can we do? So when I actually started, it was nice to already have someone who knew something about me so he could kind of break the ice in a lot of those connections. And then the biggest thing, and I still say this now, I put in effort so the coaches and athletes see that, and I think then they want to put in the effort. And so I go to the sporting events, I ask them questions. It's not just, oh, what can you do for me? Like work wise, it's, I actually want to know you as a person. Here, I actually care about this stuff. I care about the athletes and I care about you. And so slowly over time, they've they've accepted me, and I think it helps too. I do spend time over in our athletics building, the Williams Center, and so I'm not just someone sitting in the counseling center telling them, "Oh, this is what you should do," or "This is where you're going wrong." It's how can we work together? Um, but they've all been so supportive, and they do go to me of like, "Hey, what's this next step?" I also think on a kind of sadder, different note, we've had a few big events happen within our athlete population. it was about a month before I started there, we had an athlete death, and we've had some other things that happen since I've been there. And I think how I stepped up in those roles, not just to support the athletes, but to support the coaches and let them know, like, you're also allowed to be impacted by this and feel these things, has just created a bond.
Yeah. Yeah, and what an impactful, experience, and of course, like you said, an unfortunate one to kind of be a part of, but also at the same time that it sounds like you had already really built those relationships and you were already, connected within that community. And so then, of course, when tragedy struck, it was something that you were able to really, continue building on that and continue working from the foundation that you had already built there, which seems so important in that environment particularly.
Yeah, especially like we're a big school, but we're a small school. Like we're still D3, and so we we all know each other. We see each other every day, and so it was nice to just be there for each other. And then also like, all right, how can we move forward? But yeah, the coaches, all of athletic staff, they're such great people and so fun. So
Yeah, good, good. And you mentioned D3 athletics. I am I remembering correctly that you also were a D3 athlete?
yes, I was.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so both of us were D3 athletes. So we have a special place in our heart, I think, for that part of the NCAA. But can you share a little bit about what you think people get wrong about D3 athletics? What are some maybe misconceptions or things that just, I don't know, yeah, misunderstood about that division?
Yeah, I always think people think D3 athletes aren't talented. Like, oh, they weren't talented enough to go to D2 or D1. I don't think that's true at all. They are super talented, and that is not me being biased. Like, I I truly think they are talented, and I think there's this extra piece of they don't get any scholarships for it. So they are playing because they truly enjoy the sport, enjoy competition, enjoy just being a student athlete. And so I guess I never wanna minimize how talented they are, because just because 'cause they're at D3, they're still playing at a college level, and it still requires practices, workouts, traveling, games, like, all the stuff that D1 and D2 do, just without any money. Unless they get
Right.
NILs, obviously, but yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that because I would agree that I think there's this idea that, oh, they're not as talented or, they aren't as committed or whatever those stories might be. And so I think it's important to just honor that group of athletes, and knowing the different commitments that they have beyond, their athletic career too. So,
Yeah.
yeah, and you mentioned NIL. I feel like I'd love to hear more about how you see contemporary issues such as like NIL, the transfer portal. How are those things impacting students at the D3 level?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, specifically at Whitewater, we don't have as many people with NIL deals. I keep joking we need to get one with Culver's or something. Uh,
I love it. I'm for it. Let's go.
uh, but I think it's still these types of pressures they have to go with, and sometimes it's not quite as clear of how they can get to those paths. So even with NIL, it would be nice how to do it, and I think for them, it's not quite as easy of a path to make those connections, so if they want it, they also have to do a lot of work outside of just playing their sport, but I think outside of D3 too, it's just there's a lot more pressure of this individualized, like, if you mess up, we're blaming you, and part of that social media, it's feels we lose the part of them being these athletes and these kids, like, I know legally they're adults, but these kids, and we start treating them just as this commodity, at every level, I think, and sometimes that's really hard for me to see because it's just I want them to remember they're humans, they're allowed to make mistakes, and I don't know, you things go viral so quickly. All of a sudden, it's all over TikTok, all over social media, and they take it a lot harder. And outside of sports, like they have to be these perfect humans, otherwise everyone's judging them. I think that's just kind of those pressures. So especially with NIL, but also just in general, athletes at every level, they feel like they have to be perfect, and especially on college campuses, they're representing, the brand, they're representing the school. If you mess up, you're messing up for the entire school, even at a
Mhm.
D3 level, because you still wear the gear everywhere.
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah, they're under such a microscope, and I appreciate you pointing that out because I mean, we're in such an era where what do they call it? Getting clipped, right?
Yeah.
And just like getting, any mistake, any awkward moment, any like just you could trip on the field and all of a sudden it's just you're known for that or something, right? And so I think, um, it's such a challenging spot for them to be in, and I appreciate you mentioning that. I was curious, what have you seen in working with student athletes, kind of diving into it more just about social media, like smartphone use, what impact do you feel like it's having kind of broadly on mental health?
Yeah, I think there's a few different parts to that. One, social media is just everywhere, so everyone's posting on it, but also it makes it more visible. So any mistake you make, any imperfection you have, all of a sudden it is everywhere. Everyone's seeing it, everyone's commenting on it. And especially for athletes, there's also that pressure of people have this image of you. And so if you're not matching that image, then you're in the wrong. You're the one that's not perfect. And now all of a sudden everyone's against you. Um, I also think there's the part of the immediacy. Um, I was saying with phone use is everyone expects you to respond right away. You send a text, they respond. They want to know your location. They want to know answer to emails, answer to anything, a really quick response, and that's just not realistic. Like, we even though we have our phones on us most of the time, we're not able to be on it, or should we be on it 24/7 because we have other things we're doing. For athletes, whether that's practices, workouts, competition, but also they're student athletes. So they are in classes. D3 level, a lot of them also have jobs or things like that. And so this pressure to always be available can be really, really draining. And I think it affects the relationships when someone's like, well, you didn't respond quick enough, or you didn't do this, or you didn't post about me. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's not anything about you, it's just they needed a breather. And so I think I see a lot of stress in the athletes of trying to balance everything and be perfect when no one's perfect. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I know this is just I feel like this will just be an ongoing conversation for years, decades to come about just our relationship to our devices, our relationship to each other and how these play a role in our, I think I love what you were saying about just these expectations to be on and to be connected at all times. Because it's like, I think I heard someone say once, it's just the relationship that we have with our devices is the one with no boundaries, it seems sometimes. Like of all the relationships in our life, it can be the hardest to make boundaries with. And then it also just feels like, I mean, it comes with us everywhere, right? Our devices, are with us at every moment at all times. And so again, it's that, almost norm that we've created as a society that we're just on and to connected to each other all the time. But then, to your point, it just creates so many issues when then we become disconnected from what's happening in real time in our life. It causes issues relationally because there's misunderstandings about communication in that. Um, you know, having to do your own social media brand. I mean, we've all become kind of susceptible to that when we tap into social media. So there's so much here. I love the book that's been kind of like what I've read a lot throughout the year because I'm working with high school athletes right now is The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. Um, have you gotten to
It's
dive
on
into that
my
book at all?
list. I'd say it's on my
Okay.
list. I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, yeah. I will that has kind of been such a guiding work that I continue to go back to because there's so much in there that really gets at what we're talking about here and kind of the ways that um, our relationship with this, especially kind of our youth population, and I know you're working with kind of young adult population, ways that they've been really impacted by this, specifically relating to mental health. So really fascinating, but highly recommend. Yeah, I would love to chat with you after you get to read that book. It's rich. So yeah.
Okay, good. Then I may move it up a
Yeah.
little bit on my list then.
Highly recommend. Yeah, lots of good stuff in there. Yeah, and I was curious. So of course, social media and kind of the expectations we've been talking about, smartphone use, and just sort of relationship issues that arise with those things are some of the stressors, of course, that student athletes are facing. Can you speak to other stressors that you see typically that your student athletes and your clients more broadly are facing?
Yeah, I think this year it's been a lot with expectations that they're putting on themselves or that they think others are putting on themselves surrounding their performance. I also think at a D3 level, you have a lot of big fish that came from little ponds that are now with a bunch of other big fish. And I think there's this hard time of finding their role, especially if they're not starting or not getting the playing time they thought or not getting the times they thought they were, things like that. Just a lot with expectations and how to reset that mindset of, all right, let's talk about what role you have on the team, how that can fit with your personality. Also, let's think about goals and not just this big goal of, well, I want to play. Like, actually, let's think about, okay, if you want to play, have you talked to your coach about what they're looking for? Can we work on these little things? Like, break it down a little bit more.
Mhm.
I've also
Mhm.
found this year there's been a lot more like team dynamic tension, and I don't know for sure what that is because they get along well and they talk to each other and they hang out, but there's just not as much connection on field, court, whatever.
Mhm.
And maybe it goes back to phone use because maybe it's something they're checking their phones more often or they're staying connected to friends from high school a little bit easier. But I think it's just this piece of how do we get the teams to mesh in a way in different ways since the old ways aren't working anymore, like, the team bonding and things aren't creating the bonds that they used to create, but yeah, I just feel like the biggest thing is just the pressure they're putting on themselves or the pressure they think others have for them, especially at Whitewater, some people still live pretty close to home, and so their parents or their family is able to come to the games a lot, which is awesome, I love that for them. But sometimes I think they think that means they have to be perfect or that their parents are gonna be disappointed, which, the silver lining in me is hopefully they're never thinking that. Um, but again, there's just so much more pressure they're putting on themselves, especially post-COVID where some of them weren't able to compete and things like that. These are all
Yeah.
kids that were in high school during that time, and so some of the skills most learn in high school with team dynamics, kind of those next level skills related to their sport, or even how to kind of communicate with coaches, communicate with teammates. They didn't really get that in high school, and now they're trying to learn it in college when it's expected of them to know it. And so I think there's that piece too of how can we take a step back and work with the athletes as they are versus how they've been in the past, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So so much here of what they're facing and the kinds of work that you do with them. And, I hear you say there's that performance expectation. It's kind of learning a new system and kind of being that fish among other fish that are much like you. And there's so much there. And I was curious, can you open up a little bit on some of the interventions that you use, whether it's individually in your work with student athletes or also kind of on the team scale?
Yeah. I think a lot of what I do is goal setting. I think that's for everyone, right? Team and individual. That's always a gimme one. That's the easy one.
Mhm.
I've done a lot this year with communication, actually. Like, how can you communicate with your coach? How can you communicate with your teammates, with your professors? Um, I always love to do like finding your optimal performance zone. So that's been really interesting and that's fun to do individually, but I also find it really fun to do with teams because then I connect them like, okay, if you know your zone and you all are, you're ranging what it is, how can you help each other find that zone? If you're noticing someone who's usually needs that more pump up pressure energy, is feeling really down, what can you do to support them and vice versa? But
Cool.
to be honest, the biggest thing I've been doing this year is the whys and how to have fun with the sport again. So
Mhm.
a lot of times I'm asking them like, when's the last time you had fun in this sport? Not just winning, which yes is fun, but actually enjoyed your sport and what you were doing and trying to find that feeling again. Um, because if they can find that feeling, the skills and everything tend to come more naturally, and then they're enjoying the sport, they're enjoying being at Whitewater, being with their teams. And I found this year that's been weirdly the thing I've been focusing on most. So it's not a super big, intense mental skill, I guess, but it's been really nice to see some of them find their joy again.
Yeah. I love that you say that because I think so much of our work can get into sharpening performance and all the things that we have to do that. And like you were saying, as practitioners, there's, maybe we put pressure on ourselves to have these interventions that are targeted at, okay, enhancing, mental performance and these skills, and I need to use these techniques, and, who can I model after, and what literature can I read up on? And I think those things are all have their place. And also, I really love what you're saying about connecting them back to the joy of the sport. I think it's so important and it gets into that why, that purpose that we talk about with them, because I feel like, um, you know, no matter what's happening, if you can find that in the storm of whatever you're facing as a student athlete, that can really ground you and push you through some of those challenging moments of, okay, why do I do this? And what is the joy here? And where can I find those moments? I love that. I love that. I was listening to, was it Steve Kerr? He was talking about Steph Curry and just how his best performances, he looks like he's just playing backyard basketball, and just
Yes.
how important that is. And so much of what they focus on, again, at that most elite level, so much of what they're focusing on is how are we connecting you to that joy, to that backyard basketball of just playing the game that you love and you grew up, just excited to get out and do. And so I love that you're working with athletes on how to tap into that, because it's so important.
Yeah, some of the sports I'm asking, I'm like, you've been playing this since you were 5, right? Like, the skills that a lot of the stuff will come to you like breathing. Um,
Mhm.
but if you lose the fun of it, you do have to think more. You do have to do all this other stuff. And so it's been kind of cool too to see like some of the athletes I've worked with, they do find that fun again, and then they are performing better, and they just look happier in and out of their sport. Because that's the big piece too of like student athlete are only 2 of their identities, and I always say should not be the most important ones. And so it's been fun too I'm saying fun a lot, but it's been fun to see them have fun and then realize like, oh, I'm so much more than just one thing, and I can be myself across the board.
Mhm. Yeah, and I'm curious. I think sometimes when we think about fun, right, or just that idea of bringing that, I'm just thinking about coaches or, people with ideas about how you're supposed to lock in, right, and how
Yeah.
we have to be serious and there's one way to do this. And a lot of times I see coaches, like well-intentioned coaches, thinking, you know, we all have to be this certain way before we perform, or just even in performance.
Mhm.
And so how do you navigate maybe some of those tensions between, okay, having fun and experiencing that and being playful, maybe even before games or during competition, right? Versus, kind of locking in and what that looks like. How do you navigate that?
Yeah, I think it's talking about like providing that psychoeducation of the zones of optimal functioning, and how even though like someone maybe jumping around, goofing around, jamming to music doesn't look like they're locked in, that's getting them to that zone. And I
Yeah.
also talk a lot about with coaches like roles on teams and where
Mhm.
not everyone can have the same role because then you're missing so many roles. So I do a lot of conversation about different types of leadership and also different types of just other roles on the team and how all of those are needed to be successful, and that the person maybe sitting the bench not getting a lot of playing time but is goofing around and keeping the practice light while still doing what they need to. I do make that clear, like they're not allowed to just not do anything. I'm like that person like that person's is really important because the pressure maybe the starters are putting on themselves or the nerves they're feeling, that person can loosen everyone up so that people can play naturally, can have fun with it.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear. So we've kind of talked, about the work that you've been doing, and something that we both got to enjoy when we were at Springfield College was taking that adventure therapy class with Beach. Shout out Beach, and that was just really a great step in our understanding of how to create experiential learning opportunities for people. And so I wondered if you could share a little bit about, maybe some of your most memorable team-based sessions and how you incorporate experiential learning into those with some of the mental skills that you share.
Yeah, I definitely focus on experiential. Whenever I do anything team, it's doing the workshops and yes, providing psychoeducation. But even working one-on-one, I really try to get them to practice it and not just me talking at them and being like, okay, let me know how it goes. Really, let's see, this is how it's done. This is how you can use it in practice, in competition. Oh gosh, I feel like I've had some really good fun ones. Okay, this one's actually, like, really silly. So with the track team last year, I was doing individualized zone of optimal functioning, but I was talking about emotional arousal, and I think this is just working with, like, college students, I think. I
Mm-hmm.
always make it really clear emotional arousal. Uh,
Yes.
And the head coach, he comes in after, or like he was watching and he kind of joined afterwards, gave his little speech, and he said, just arousal. And everyone started laughing. And I turned to the coach and I was like, and that's why I say emotional arousal. But fast forward a year when I'm working with them this year, some of the athletes I was bringing this up again for the new ones to remind them, and the athletes are like, "Oh yeah, we remember when this happened," and like it's stuck in our brain. Like so, even though it was like such a silly moment, and not what I wanted them to remember, but it was interesting because they're like, "Oh, but I remember you were talking about this, and this is where my zone is." And so, even though it's so silly, it did get them like the returning athletes, they remembered what the zones were and they remembered why it was important and how they can support each other and talk about it with the first years. But I think the biggest thing for me besides that, it's not just one moment, it's just the moments in the workshops when I see it kind of click for the athletes
Yeah.
or an athlete that maybe is standing off a little more to the side, maybe they're new, trying to figure out dynamics, and they have a moment where either they do something really well, or someone acknowledges them, or they just feel like they can actually fit in.
Mhm.
Those have been my favorite moments, just seeing someone who maybe is trying to stay a little hidden or second guessing themselves, and they just have a moment of confidence, and then
Mhm.
I can build off of that. Those are probably my actual favorite moments, though.
Yeah. We've got our silly moments and, but I love that you say that because I think those are the moments that are so human. And when athletes can have kind of an emotional experience that then um, pairs with the content that we're sharing, then, it works, right? And whether it's like goofy or absurd or, intense or whatever it might be, I feel like that then solidifies that. And so I feel like that example really, really showcases that. Um, we talked a little bit about some things that people get wrong about Division III student athletes. I wondered, what do people get wrong about the work that you do, or what are some misconceptions there?
Yeah, I think there's always the big one with mental health in general of you have to have a diagnosis to work on your mental health. Nope. Anyone and everyone can work on mental health. We all have things we're dealing with in life. So I always like to emphasize that, especially with athletes who are nervous about kind of that next step of counseling. They're like, well, I'm not diagnosed with anything. I'm like, you're right. And that's okay. But you also are balancing all this stuff and that can be weighing on you a lot. Or maybe you went through something, whatever it is. I'm like, you don't have to have something quote unquote wrong with you, which mental health diagnosis is not something wrong with you. But I'm like, you don't have to have this big label. You can
Mhm.
just be struggling and that's human to do. And then I think that a big thing with mental performance is they think there's going to be immediate effects. And I wish there were. I wish I could be like, oh, try this. And all of a sudden everyone is PRing or winning championships. But the truth is it takes just as much practice in those skills as it does the technical skills of the sport. But if you're willing to put in that work and willing to be honest of what's working, what's not when I do discuss skills, then we'll get there. We will get you to your goals, hopefully, and get you to learn something. But yeah, I think those are the two biggest misconceptions.
Yeah. Yeah, I really appreciate your point about that it takes practice. I think I try to emphasize that in the work that I do with athletes all the time is just as much as any skill that you're training, anywhere you're trying to improve your game, we have to do the same mentally. And it's not going to be, if I could wave a wand and just be like, here you go, here's all the information. I would love that our position didn't exist. If we could just instill athletes all the confidence, all the mental performance skills, everything. If I could give that to you overnight, that'd be great. But it doesn't work that way. And so I appreciate you mentioning that, because I think it can be, and I think not only athletes can have that perception of the work we do, but other, supporting staff or coaches and things, that they will come to us and kind of almost, I've had those experiences where a coach will come and be like, what do we do with this? And I'm going, well, they could come see me and we could do some work together. And I think, that can be frustrating and sometimes difficult for us to have those moments where it's not a quick fix. I really wish it was. But trying to relate it back, like you were saying, to, what we do in the weight room or what we do just to kind of train in other ways. Similarly, it's not just going to be uploaded really quickly.
And say, and every single athlete or every single student I meet with, the thing I always say is, whatever I'm suggesting, you're allowed to say it doesn't work for you or it wasn't going well. I was like, some of them laugh at me because I do say it every time. I'm like, I'm never going to be offended or mad if you try something and it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to tell me that, because I rather know so we can go down a different path and find the skills that work for you. But I just like to tell them that too, because I think with a lot of people, but especially athletes, they have that competitive and perfectionism where if I suggest something to them, well, I'm the one who knows. So if it's not working, they take it personally that they're doing something wrong. So that's something I talk to coaches about too, of like, I can provide these skills, but when I do these team workshops, they have to be, more for everyone, which is why the individual is so important, because I can only do these skills when I'm working with a team. But once I know the individual, I can get more specific. And so I think that's kind of a misconception too, of we don't know everything and it's not a one size fit all.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm like, we always kind of come back to, is that the client is the expert on themselves, right? And so I think that always helps me in my work with student athletes. And I think, especially just instilling, like you're saying, about, hey, if something's not working, I always try to say that if something's not working, I mean, tell me, because if this, and I'll say, at work with teenagers right now, I'm like, if this sucks, just let me know, because I would like to, I don't want to waste our time working on something that maybe isn't fitting for you. And it doesn't matter to me if it's more about how can I help you and how can we find the thing that does work. So yeah, because I think athletes, like you're saying, can be really hard on themselves about, oh, well, I'm broken somehow because this didn't work for me. When it's no, it's actually, let's just find what works. We're just messing with a puzzle here and trying to find the right pieces. So yeah, I think that can be really helpful and relieve some of that pressure of just, oh, if this doesn't work, then all hope is lost,
Like I'm a failure now. It's like, no, it's the next thing to try. Like,
yeah,
whatever. We have this huge toolbox of things. We have plenty to choose from.
yeah. And I like that, just kind of being playful with them about it too, of just like, if that sucked, let's just throw it over there and we'll try it. Let's go back to the drawing board. So yeah, I appreciate that. I was curious, you've spoken a little bit to it, but can you share more about just how you see student athletes coping just with the different stressors, the different demands that they're under? What does coping look like in this population?
I think it's support system. That is the biggest thing I've seen help. Like, yes, the breathing techniques, grounding techniques, those are all wonderful and great and do work. But I think it's really become important of who you surround yourself with. Not just so you can be yourself, but also when you're struggling, you feel comfortable and confident enough to talk to those people. And whether that's friends, family, coaches, other staff, me, like, I don't want it just to be me, but it's if they can get this strong support system and in and out of their sport. That's something I emphasize a lot, of like, you need people outside of your sport circle too.
Mm-hmm.
I have found that's made the biggest difference, because they just, like, I feel like I've said this multiple times, they're able to just be themselves in
Right.
all areas of their life. They don't have to put on this show of, this is, I'm this big time football player. Like, I'm this really tough guy. And maybe they are, but they can also maybe let loose a little bit more or be honest about when they're struggling. Um, and when they have that support system, they can let go a little bit and know they're going to be caught.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. And one of my favorite questions that I heard recently from it was Dr. Amy Edmondson. She's a Harvard professor, kind of a powerhouse in the field of organizational leadership, and really an authority on psychological safety and the science of failing and failing well. And she asked, how can you let go of the things that are keeping you stuck? And I really liked that question. And I was curious, in the spirit of that question, what's keeping student athletes most stuck, you think, right now?
The boxes they're supposed to fit in.
Mm.
It's if you're a softball player, you fit in these boxes. If you're a football player, you fit in this box. And the box of like the image you're supposed to portray, but also what the sport expects from you and what people stereotype you on campus or just around circles, I guess. It's everyone is supposed to fit in these tiny little boxes that none of us do. And our identities, especially student athletes, they're student athletes, but they're humans first. And even like the student athlete identities may not be that important to them. Like maybe it's something with family or friends or work or any other things. Like I think when they're student athletes, they're expected to be student athletes and fit into these molds and be so proud and that the student athlete is supposed to be the number one and number two thing they think about. So I think that's what's getting them stuck is you're only playing this sport for 4 more years at the D3 level. What are you outside of that box?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it's so important because, as you're saying, this is such a short window and for athletes and particularly, not just the 4-year time that they're playing sport in college, but also that it could end at any moment. Whether that's you don't make the team, whether that's you have an injury, and there are just unexpected turns that life takes. And so having those conversations about who are you outside of this so that if it does, well, it will end inevitably. So when it does end, how can we prepare them to just have the skills so that they're ready for that transition?
Yeah. Just to be, and that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm curious, of course, you're a former athlete yourself. How do you feel like your work in this space, kind of as a professional, has shaped how you reflect back on your experience as an athlete and, how to maybe, um, you know, ways that your kind of experience as an athlete may inform the work that you do now with student athletes. So kind of a reciprocal.
Yeah, I think, I wasn't a starter during my 4 years of college, so I think I do have a nice perspective of it was really important for me to figure out who I was outside of the sport.
Mhm.
And I played soccer, so it's a sport you can still play. I do an adult rec league in the summer.
Let's go.
But it's I always say like how can you still find pieces of being an athlete in the next whatever you do
Mhm.
because you learn such great skills. So a lot of what I do with the student athletes is that kind of transition in, transition out work.
Right.
And I think looking back for me, just my path was so unusual. Um, I always say I accidentally graduated in 3 years for my undergrad. And so it was one of those things, I didn't get the typical senior year or the goodbyes. And so I always really instill that on these athletes, like whether it's an unplanned or planned way of ending, make sure you say goodbye to the sport in a way that works for you. So even like for me, I always look back of those last like few weeks when I realized I wasn't coming back. I
Mhm.
made sure to talk to my teammates or I made sure to like go to the field one more time, do these things to be able to actually let go so that when I graduated, I could move forward. Um, and I think the other thing is too, looking back, I was myself on that team. I was the goofball and all of that. It was a few years ago. I realized they were still, I don't think they do it anymore because the coaches left and there's been so many changes. But
Mhm.
there was a moment when our coach was like, first five. And I was just like, last 40 is pretty important too. And in like, I want to emphasize, in a super respectful way.
Yes.
But that became a thing, like, they said for a few years even after I left, and so, sometimes I tell that story to the athletes I work with because 'cause I'm like, "I never hid who I was." I knew my role on that team was to keep the energy up, and I accepted that role. It took a little bit, like, I all growing up, I was the one that played 90 minutes, so it was really hard for me at first to shift,
Mhm.
but I always talk about, like, once I found my role and accepted that role, it made it a lot more fun, enjoyable. I felt better, like, I felt more confident then and not always waiting, "When's gonna be my chance? When's gonna be my chance?" It was just, "If I get a chance, I'm gonna put my, 100% effort in," and so
Mhm.
I can talk to the athletes about that are having that similar experience.
Right.
Yeah, so I feel like I rambled on that, but some of those pieces.
Yeah. No, and I think it's so interesting to hear everyone's story who's in our position as a practitioner or working with athletes and just how we reflect back on our experiences, how they inform how we interpret, or conceptualize student athletes and the things that they're coming in with. Because I love that you're sharing your experience. And then you also have showcased just how curious you are about, athlete experiences. So yes, it can inform that, but also we're remaining curious. I mean, I'm sure you have plenty of times where you're reading with soccer players and you have that piece of you that informs, okay, yes, I understand this piece of the game, or I understand what they might be going through, and remaining curious to just about their experiences because of course we're all a bit different. So
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah, and I think the biggest reason I went into this role in general was when I was struggling with finding my footing,
Mhm.
it was that suggestion, "Oh, just quit. Just quit." And I think I like being in a role where I can tell them, "I get it, you don't wanna quit. You can still be struggling and feeling off, like, on the team, but you wanna figure it out, so let's figure it out together," versus,
Mhm.
"Well, if you just quit, then you're fine." Like, then those issues are no longer issues. The sport
Yeah.
is important to them.
Yeah. Yeah, and I appreciate you bringing up quitting because I feel like it can be such a loaded topic for student athletes, and that decision can be really charged. And I always like to think, okay, who do I need to show up as in the room for them? Am I someone, I just want to avoid being another person maybe in their life who's saying either quit or don't quit, right? So let's kind of look at both sides of this coin and talk through, where are you at? And I always try to emphasize that of just I'm on your team here. So if you're feeling like quitting is the thing that's going to support, you best and optimize, your health and all of these pieces, then great. And let's roll with that and talk about how we have difficult conversations about that. And vice versa. If you're feeling like that's part of it, but you really want to stick it out and stay and see what can happen here, then great. Let's work through how do we make this more optimal for you. So yeah, I think it can be so challenging, especially like when other personnel are involved, whether it's parents or coaches or other people who all want to put their 2 cents in on, oh, I know what's best for them, or they don't, need to quit or they need to quit or whatever it might be.
"Well, just hold it out to the end of the season," or, "You only have 1 more year." I'm like, "You only have 1 more year, but that's still a full year. So,
Right.
what's gonna make you happiest?" And, yeah, exploring, like, giving them the chance to actually explore that without adding the opinion in all the time. It's, "No, truly, what are you thinking?"
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, and it's so important, especially when we see the conversations around student athlete mental health are, we know that they're there, we know that they're happening, we know that people care about it. And then these are these kind of moments where it's okay, we need to practice what we preach then about, is it the best thing for an athlete to stay in it, or is it the best thing for them, to step out and step away from sport, and how do we support them in either decision? So yeah. Yeah, big topic there with quitting. So,
That's it. That's always a tough one.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious, what changes do you feel like you'd like to see in resources or just support for student athletes kind of when we look out in the next decade or so? What would you like to see change or grow for our student athlete population?
I think specifically for the D3 level, more funding for mental health and mental performance for student athletes. So with my role, I'm still housed in a counseling center. I'm very lucky that like our athletics department is really flexible, and so I do have kind of a space I use over there, so that I can be where the athletes are.
Nice.
But my salary comes from the counseling center, and so and I love the work I do. I like it, I really do, and also I love my office. I'm at home, but I have some giant chairs.
Love it. Love it.
I really think there's only so much time I can give, and so it's really hard sometimes when I'm getting reach outs from athletes or from coaches, from administration of, "Here's what's going on, how can you help?" I'm like, I only have so many hours in a day, and my primary role is in the counseling center. I don't only work with athletes, and so I've been very fortunate that my work is shifting to doing more with athletes, but the funding isn't there, and so that does make it hard working at a state school where we have to really defend everything we're doing. Where's our work going? And since I'm housed in counseling for the general population, I have to defend the work I'm doing with the athletes, which has been really easy. The data shows it's been helpful, but it's it's hard. So I think long term, being able to have more funding available at D3 levels, because the NCAA is requiring these things, and right now it's not as high of requirements for D3, but it's still there. And yet, how are we supposed to fund that? How am I supposed to do my job when really I'm kind of doing three jobs at once?
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of a red tape one, but I think other kind of long-term goals is just continuing to normalize it. Um, Being in those spaces and it be normal to see a mental performance coach walking around or a counselor being there. Um, it is getting more common at Whitewater. Like, they all just say hi to me, and I'm where I am. If my door is open, they'll say hi. Even if they're not coming in for something, coaches will say hi. I've become pretty normalized, but still there's some hesitation there, or there's a few athletes that still do the whole, "Ooh, if I look at her, that means something," and
She knows what's going on with me. I don't want to go there. I don't want to talk about it.
yeah, she's a mind reader. She's gonna know there's something up, and uh, so I think continuing to just make it normal that just like there's nutritionists and athletic trainers and all of that, there's mental performance, there's counselors there, and we're all part of the same team, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just you've spoken a lot to just how you've integrated yourself into the system and the ways that you are visible, because I feel like visibility is such an important piece of the work we do. And when we're visible, then it kind of does break down some of those barriers or those walls that student athletes might have about what what kind of stigma there might be around who we are and what we do. It's very common in my environment right now with the student athletes. It's been kind of a joke of, oh, you need a session with Nina, or you need to get right. And I like it in the way of there's this joking around it and we can have that lightness to it. And, I think that it's also, we're still working on that idea that, okay, you don't have to have a problem to come. We can actually, I try to emphasize, yes, those are certainly like reasons to come in, as if you're, handling issues or you're struggling with something. And also we can work on sharpening things. And so I really like the idea, and I use that word a lot with athletes, of just, you don't have to come in with some big issue. We can come in and sharpen what you're already doing well, and maybe where you have to
Yes. Oh,
take
I love that.
to the next level. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you were saying, like, they say, "Oh, you need a session with Nina." That's when I first started here, that was a lot of the student athletes that would come in, "Well, so and so met with you, and they said it could be helpful." And I'm like, "All right, cool."
Yeah.
And I think one of the biggest signs I've seen of it becoming more normalized, which for better or worse, I'll just be kind of around, and they are very open with their lives, and just like, I'm like, I actually didn't need to know that. But it's funny because it's just, oh, she's here. She can hear this. She's not going to judge. I can just be myself around her. I don't have to put on the show. I can
Right.
talk about, my dating life, or how I forgot my shoes again, or, whatever it is, or I tried this new food and it didn't sit right. And it's all just like, it's all normal. And so that's been a really fun piece. I keep calling them kids. They're not kids, they're
No,
adults.
yeah, I got you.
But it's been really nice to see them be comfortable versus when I'm in their space, they feel like they have to put on a show. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, it's just been so silly to watch them, I guess, be themselves and know that that's okay. I'm not judging you. Like, all right, you had a bad date. That's glad I could hear it.
Yeah.
But, like it's nice to see them be comfortable around us. So when you were saying, like, oh, you need a session with Nina, like, that's what, like, if they're comfortable, everything will be normalized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love you pointing out the sideline consultation type things that happen where they're just telling you random stuff. And, I think sometimes kind of my go-to with athletes too is if they come up to me and they dump on me or they share something like that. Sometimes they'll say, do you want support or solutions right now? Or do you want to get into it or are you just telling me? Right. Because I think that it can be really easy for me to go into, oh, I need to fix this or I need to give them something. And sometimes the best thing I can give them is just a choice and, hey, what do you need from me right now? Right. Do you want to get into this? Because your teammates are all around us, right? We're in the dugout or we're, on the field or we're right next to your coach and, an earshot away. So are we getting into this or are you just telling me? You just want to vent, right? And I found that that can just be really empowering too, because especially I'm working with teens right now and, autonomy is such an interesting thing in their life right now. And so I think being able to give them that opportunity to say, hey, what do you need? Which way are we going? Because I can play both roles right now. But you're in the driver's seat on what we're doing. So
Well, one of the funny things that happened recently, we're waiting to start kind of our team or the event group I was working with. We were waiting to kind of start our mental prep session, as we call it. And they're all just sitting there talking. And I kind of half listen because I'm like, also want to give them a little bit of privacy, even though they're sitting right there in front of me. Um, but then one of them goes, "Stop saying that in front of her. She's gonna think I'm a bad student, or she's gonna think this." And I was like, and before I said anything, one of them goes, "She is not gonna think that. She's gonna think it's funny, and she's gonna just make sure you're okay, but she's not
oh,
gonna judge you." And I was just like, I kind of had that moment of, okay, I'm building that trust with them, like, yay. And
yeah,
then they were all back to joking around, doing their thing, and it was just kinda for me, it was really fun to see and felt like, "Alright, I am supporting them in the way they need."
yeah, absolutely. And I love that example because I think it just really showcases the work that you've done to be in their space and that someone is going, wait, she's not gonna judge you. Just be yourself. It's okay, And I love that. In working with teens, a lot of times they'll cuss in session, right? And then they'll look at me like,
Sorry.
oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And I'm thinking, really okay, this is your space. You do your thing. Let's go. So yeah,
Yeah. I always
it's
say if I can't handle cussing, like swearing, I couldn't be working with this age group. And
right.
they always go, "Yeah, good point." I was like,
Yeah, you're right. Okay. Cool.
"Ah,
Well, Kathryn, I'm gonna transition us to kind of close out our episode for today with some rapid fire questions for you. So we'll
that's
run through these and just we'll see what you think. Um, okay. So as a Wisconsinite, it's important to ask this question: if you could only have one Packer quarterback to the end of time, would you choose Favre, Rodgers, or Love?
oh gosh." I think even though he's getting on my nerves a little bit lately, I grew up with him, so I have to say Rogers.
Okay. All right. All right. Next question: the last great book that you read.
Hey, when you had said this question, I was like, "Oh, I've been reading a lot lately." I think the book that's really made an impact on me lately is Marion Hossa's, biography, which now
Oh,
I'm blanking on the actual name of. I think it's just Hossa, actually.
okay.
I've had it on my bookshelf for a few years, finally read it. Reading his story, getting kind of the details of it, the mental performance side of it, the mental health side, and just learning, like, impact of coming from another country to the US and all that entails. Like, I feel like there's so much of it that I could use with my athletes, even though some of them actually do come from other countries, but just so much about there's so many pieces to who they are, and even these big professional athletes have things going on, and I've always been a huge fan of Marian Hossa, so reading his story in this way, it just really hit home for me.
Love it. I have to check that one out. Thank you for the rec. We've exchanged book recs now.
Yeah.
Okay, if there was a Springfield College alumni softball game, are you drafting Judy Van Raal? Are you drafting Britton Brewer? Need to know.
Wise, I feel like either would be really fun, but I think because Britt is such a menace, I would
Mhm.
want him on my team so we could be menaces together.
Absolutely. I think that would be a powerhouse. Yes, I love it. Okay, something that you are currently striving towards, whether professionally or personally.
I don't know if we had started recording this when I said it. This
Yeah.
year, I always give like a word of the year of what I want to do, and this year's word is risk. So I think both professionally and personally, I'm just starting or trying to do more without thinking. Like, if I want to do this, I'm going to do it. If I want to try something, I'm going to try it. Like, I'm, God, I'm turning 30 this year.
Me too. Let's go.
And so I feel like I've done so much according to my plan. Like, I've hit these goals, I've done this, I've done that. I want to get back to just having fun. What I tell the people I work with, like having fun, being myself. So it's not some big goal, I guess, but just taking these risks and being okay with not everything's going to be perfect or fit in my perfect 10-year plan.
I love it. I love it. I know the 20s were so much about getting this degree and doing this and getting this certification. And I love that reminder to just be. And, we got to practice what we're preaching a bit.
Yes.
Also, my wife and I have a thing that we say to each other, which is this is 30. And so it's kind of our ongoing joke of the things that we do now that are exemplary of what it is to be 30. So just really like dorky adult things, but we also kind of love it. So yeah. So maybe you
I
can
may start
do
doing
that for yourself. It also makes it fun because we're like, this is cool. I'm okay with this.
Yeah, it's good to be getting older.
That's right. That's right. What a privilege, right? Okay. So next question. Your favorite championship game to watch?
I'm going to cheat a little bit because I have two.
Okay.
I love watching the World Series every year. And even though I'm from Wisconsin, I am a Cubs fan. So sorry, everyone. And so, 2016 was the greatest year for me in that way.
So solid.
But honestly, though, World Cup, both men's and women's, I love watching the World Cup for soccer and just, it is not a boring sport, people. It is not a boring sport.
Absolutely. It's the world sport. Please. It's the world game. Let's go.
So, I'm going to cheat and say both of those.
Okay. I love it. I'll allow it. In the spirit of baseball and your love for that and the Cubs, what would be your walkout song?
Okay. I was thinking about this a lot because my music taste shifts on my mood, but
me too.
I think what I landed on would be the song Buzzin' by the rapper's name is Man, but specifically the remix with 50 Cent. I recommend listening to it. So Buzzin', Buzzin'. It is a fun song, people.
All right. I love it. Book rec, song rec. Let's keep it going. Okay. And lastly, Kathryn, something that a student athlete who's currently being challenged might benefit from hearing today.
Challenges are just something that will get you to the next level. So I think it's, relaxing, doing what you can, and trusting yourself. These challenges will make you a better person and you'll learn something from it. What's the saying? Win or learn. And so I think someone who's getting challenged, it's trust yourself, relax, and you're going to learn something from this and it's going to make you better.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, Kathryn, thank you so much again for joining the show. It was so great to reconnect with you and celebrate the exceptional work that you're doing. Really appreciated you being here.
Yeah, I apologize for my internet issues.
That's okay.
I'd say, like I said, the living in the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin, sometimes doesn't go well. But I really appreciate being on here, and it was so nice to see you again, Nina.
Yeah, you too. And thanks everyone for tuning in to this episode of United with Big Team at Indiana University. We'll catch you next time. Take care and be well.
44-41. And a touchdown wins it. Snap back to Hilinski. Drops back. Has time. Passes left. Caught made at the catchment of the 20-yard line. Morrow to the 10. Runs for the win. Dives for the pylon.